Gertler is the publisher of About Comics. About has as eclectic a catalog of book and comics reprints as one can imagine. Let me just give you a sample so you get a sense of it, but we'll talk with Nat more about his catalog. For instance, there's Bridge Mix, which is a set of comics that Charles Schulz of Peanuts fame did about the culture around bridge playing. He has one that came out recently that I in fact reviewed and enjoyed, Drift Marlowe, which is a reprint of an obscure early 1960s space race strip. There's The Green Book, which is a travel guide for Black families during Jim Crow in the 1940s and 50s. The Crossword Craze, which reprints early examples of crosswords from the 1920s when that craze was really just taking hold. My old friend Stan Mack's Revolting Rebels, a cartoon history of the American Revolution, and even a book of 1950s cartoons from Roman Catholic publications that are gag strips about nuns. It goes on and on. The catalog is vast and diverse, and we'll dig into some of this. But please welcome Nat. Nat, hi.
Hi, glad to be here.
Where does this find you? Where are you and About based?
I am based in Camarillo, California, and About is based wherever I am because really it's a one-person company.
Right.
It's me.
Before we get into how you've chosen such a diverse group of titles to reprint and many more that I didn't get to mention, let's talk a little bit about your origin story. How did you discover comics? When did you embrace it? And I also want to include here a little bit about the career that you yourself have writing comics, which I think is a substantial part of your background.
Well, comics were always around the house. We had Peanuts books, lots and lots of, no, I won't say lots and lots. We had a number of Peanuts books, and those are some of the earliest things I can remember, collections of the comic strip by Charles Schulz.
Mhm.
And I started buying comic books when I was young. I bought some Richie Rich and Little Archie, and then Little Archie went up a nickel and Richie Rich didn't. So I was a Richie Rich man from then on. I got to college, got introduced to superhero comics, and that's when I started thinking about these would be interesting things to actually work on rather than just
Mhm.
read. And one day I started going to comic conventions. I happened to be in New York, and I got on a bus and I sat next to a guy who was reading some comics, and it turned out his name was Ron Wilson, and he was the artist on The Thing for Marvel.
Mhm.
And suddenly I realized, oh, actual human beings do this. It's actually something that can be done. So, I started pursuing some writing. Got a real job. I was a computer programmer for a number of years there, and I was doing some writing on the side. And then I left my job, figuring I was going to take a month or two off and then find another job. But I still haven't gotten around to it. It's been,
Mhm.
35 years now. So some of the writing started to take off. Not some comics, some I started writing computer books, easy to read, easy PCs. I did the Complete Idiot's Guide to PowerPoint, things like that.
Right.
So because I took my computer background and my comics background and sort of brought them together for these things. And eventually I realized I kept on trying to write more comics. And I was, I did some Flintstones, I did some Speed Racer, I did more obscure titles people haven't heard of. And I realized that if I took some time and instead of but doing 10 pitches for the Power Rangers comic book, which I was working on, if I did one more computer book, I would have money to publish something myself. And that way I could control what it was I was doing. It'd be something I'd own, something I created, something I was more vested in than Power Rangers. And that's really how About Comics came about. At first, it was to publish my stuff. And then as long as I was doing that, there were some things that seemed obvious to me to publish. My first book was something called Panel One, comic book scripts by top writers, because I always wanted to know how other people wrote comics. When I was trying to
Mhm.
figure it out, I didn't know. I found a few small examples or something and went from there. But I got in touch with some relatively big name comics folks and got some scripts that I could reprint in this book. And, that came out about 25 years ago, is still in print, still sells in the hundreds of copies a year. So, that turns out I wasn't the only one looking for it.
That's kind of a theme with you, if I may, about that started with your impulse to publish sort of came from, well, this is something that I'd be interested in reading, and I think that sort of propels some of the choices that you've made since then. Let's talk about this collection, this catalog that you've created of such
Okay.
diverse books, and how you've come to them. Generally, what's your principle when it comes to picking a topic to reprint,
Well,
especially?
well, usually a lot of it is I've discovered something interesting that isn't available. And I'm like, I want to know more about it. And to a certain
Hmm.
degree, publishing and researching are the same thing to me.
Hmm.
Um, and so I discovered that there were a lot of cartoon books about nuns, about Catholic concepts in general, but most frequently about nuns that were coming out during the 1950s. So I did a lot of research into why this was happening, how this happened, and I've given presentations at Comic-Con on that, done a video on that. But I also um, realized there's a lot of stuff that was in the public domain. People hadn't maintained the copyrights.
Hmm.
And half as a gag, I released seven non comic book cartoon collections reprints at once
Hmm.
and announced it on April Fool's Day. So everybody thought it was a joke. And then, no, look, go to Amazon. These are all available. Um, once I got into that, I ended up doing a couple dozen books roughly in that realm because I became fascinated with this little sidelight of comics that nobody else had paid attention to.
Hmm. And
So,
you've done that in a bunch of places. I mean, for instance, let's talk about one that I kind of really enjoyed were the supermarket comic strip ads of the 1940s, which
yes,
was
and
a
that was
whole
something where
genre.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's a genre, although most about two-thirds of the book is a single run from
Hmm.
Safeway supermarkets.
Right.
And was looking through old newspapers, looking for something else generally, and I would be on a page and I would see some of these comic strips. You put a comic strip on a page, that's going to get catch attention.
Hmm.
And at first, I saw one or two of these comic strips, and it was, you know, um, oh, Brenda, my husband is unhappy because my meat is so tough and I'm spending so much money. Have you heard of Safeway? Ah, that saves the day. So there, it was a cute little morality tale
Right.
in three or four panels. But as I looked through more of them, some of them started to vary. And what was going on was America had gotten into World War II, and suddenly they were talking about things that were important during World War II. How to work with vegetables when you couldn't get meat, how to share your
Yep.
ride to Safeway and save on wear and tear on tires and gas, things
Yep.
like that. And I discovered it told a whole tale and one of what home life was like during World War II, what it was like on the home front. And once I saw that, I was like, hey, other people might be interested in this as well.
I-
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and another part that I want to highlight among in your catalog that I think is especially important, not
Mhm.
just curious and just fascinating, but important, is the stuff that you've done with ethnic newspapers. You've revived some of Ollie Harrington's Bootsy strips
Hmm.
from the black newspapers, which I think only now are really getting drilled into to revive, some of the comic strips that the black newspapers nationwide were publishing, like Ollie Harrington. But then also another one, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Dianu, from the Jewish weeklies,
Yes,
which really were a comic strip about assimilation. And
absolutely.
joking about assimilation. So there's a whole area of your catalog, and I guess this is also related to the Green Book reprints, which I think are absolutely fascinating. I can't recommend those enough for anybody to try one of those Green Books. But you're really helping to revive and surface an aspect of American comic strip history that really has been woefully overlooked and really adds dimension to our understanding.
Oh, absolutely. It's been overlooked, and that was one of the things that attracts me. If you old comics, it's kind of like crypto coins. When a new crypto
Mhm.
coin first came out, when Bitcoin first came out, it was easy to run enough calculations to get one. But then you had to
Mhm.
start digging in different, more calculated, digging in different places, finding numbers that people hadn't looked at, whatever. I don't fully understand it. I'm not into crypto,
Mhm.
but but comic is kind of like that. People have looked at Little Abner, the normal mainstream newspaper strips, the big publisher comic books have been well explored and more power to it. There's some great stuff, but I'm not as interested in doing the 10th reprint of Terry and the Pirates, this time 3% better reproduction.
Right.
as I am in finding something that nobody's been looking at.
Hmm.
And the black newspapers especially, there were amazing things. There were superheroes in there before what everybody thought was the first black superhero,
Right.
because they've been looking at comic books, but nobody was looking at these black weeklies. So I did. I haven't reprinted those in book form yet, but I did a video about that, just
Hmm.
so people, or a couple of videos about that, just so people would know. Because again, I am my publishing and my research, I'm a show and teller, and sometimes I
Hmm.
do that through here. I found something cool. Here's the book of it, and sometimes it's a video or an article or whatever.
Let's talk a little bit about the process of finding audiences for these. You know, you and I think we bring a certain passion to just discovering
Mhm.
these things and uncovering them. But let's talk a little bit about the business of this and the marketing of this and how you find audiences. What have been your big bestsellers so far?
Well, well, the Green Book
Hmm.
is, if we don't just limit it to comics, the Green Book is the biggest bestseller I've
Hmm.
done. I've reprinted 8 different years of this African American travel guide. And that was just me seeing some articles about it and wanting to get a copy, and then discovering you can't get a copy. They're thousands of dollars, which told me I wasn't the only person interested. And so I came out with those reprints, and they did well instantly. And then a couple years later, a movie called Green Book came out, and
Right.
I had a really good year there.
Hmm.
Um, but also in terms of audiences, I'm often looking at different places. I'm not so much aiming at the comic shop, which is a
Right.
very small portion of my sales. But I sell a lot of things to museum bookstores.
Hmm.
And that's highly the Green Book, but it's not only the Green Book.
Hmm.
For example, I reprint a book of kids' letters to LBJ, Lyndon
Hmm.
Baines Johnson, President Johnson. And who's going to want that in this world? Well, there's a Lyndon Baines Johnson museum, and there's Lyndon Baines Johnson's historic sites. And as it
Hmm.
happens, this book was illustrated by a guy named Charles Schulz. And there's a museum just about him and gift shops about him. So I've made sales. Yeah,
Wow.
working on a print-on-demand basis. I don't need to sell a ton up front all at once, but if I can get places where they're going to order 50 copies, 100 copies a year, whatever, it
Hmm.
works out nicely.
How do you market them?
Ineffectively. I'm not good at what I do. A lot of what I do doesn't sell very well, but they're supported by the things that do. But I do try to reach out to, especially if I'm doing something like an LBJ collection. I reach out to the museum. I send the gift shop copies. I've done there's conventions for museum gift shops, and I've done a couple of those. It wasn't as effective as I would hope.
Hmm.
But it gets me out there, and I keep trying. And within that realm, within the museum realm, they recommend to each other.
Hmm.
So once you get in somewhere, it helps a lot.
Does the idea I take it the idea comes first and then the marketing channel after, or do you ever see a market? Do you ever have you ever produced a book because you simply know there is a market there that's underserved?
Well, I produce books because I think there might be. I'm never that
Hmm.
confident,
Hmm.
but I produced a book of single panel cartoons about family road trips.
Hmm.
And that was a first in mind for a certain specific market that didn't prove to exist for me, but it's something now I now sell to Route 66 museums, things like that.
Hmm.
Things that celebrate the family road trip from the 1950s and 60s. So that definitely was it wasn't my favorite comic panel in the world, something called the Family Car.
Hmm.
But it had specific things of interest, and it showed its time a bit, and that was sort of cool. But for a lot of these things, I build the book first and then worry about finding the market, which I can do because I'm working print on demand. So
Hmm.
I'm not printing up thousands of copies and paying to have them warehoused. If I find a market someday, that's great.
Let me, before I do want to talk about print on demand and how that may have has changed things for you,
Hmm.
but before that, let's talk about where you're sourcing a lot of this stuff and how much, if any, restoration you're doing on it to make it print worthy.
Well, a lot of it is going through newspaper archives. About I
Mhm.
have access to various digital newspaper archives for the newspaper materials. And that's really the only way some of this stuff exists on microfilm or on these archives which were made from the microfilm
Hmm.
or microfiche. So, and a lot of the getting it good is seeing if I can have access to the same strip through multiple different papers. So if it looks good one place, if it printed well one place, great. If not, I can go to other places.
Hmm.
Sometimes that's not an option. Sometimes I'm dealing with material that only appeared in one paper, and so some of the books have a very variable reprint quality. But as long as it's good enough to read, I am not. I won't say satisfied. I always wanted to make it better, but I'm willing to put that out rather than to just lose a piece of history that because it can't be done perfectly.
Hmm. Tell us a little bit about for those of us who don't know a lot about print on demand. Tell us how that actually works, and when you started using it and how it's changed things for you.
Yeah, well, I started using it probably about 15 years ago. I
Mm.
was publishing through standard means for 10 years before that, and I was getting slacking returns. I was not as well able to predict what the market would want as would serve, and the amount of money I was making off of each publication was going down.
Mhm.
But with print on demand, which is a matter of you can upload files to a service, and there's a number of services available. I do a lot through Amazon service because it has certain advantages for me, but I there are other print on demand services I use for particular things. And then they get made available through the bookstore market or through Amazon, specifically in some cases. And if somebody orders a copy, then the copy is printed.
Mhm.
And the servicer sits there and says, well, you get this percentage of the book's price minus the cost, however much it costs to print.
Mhm.
And for a simple black and white 100-page book, that's maybe $3.
Mhm.
So if I'm pricing the book at $12, there's room for profit in there, even
Mhm.
though I'm only getting a percentage of that $12.
Mhm. Yeah, I know I've ordered some of your books and other books that are print on demand and I get them and it literally says in there it was printed 2 days before it's in my hand.
Hmm.
It's remarkable.
It's
How
fresh.
has that changed then your approach and your thinking about the catalog itself, what you can print, how much you can print? For instance, how much have you done in the last year and has that changed because you can do it on demand?
Oh, I'm well, the last year has been a little less just because I was focused on some video projects for a while there.
Hmm.
But in general, I am publishing a lot more stuff than I ever did when I was doing traditional printing. It's cheap for me to try something.
Hmm.
And so I'm willing to take chances. And the Green Book was an excellent example of that. I didn't know there was an audience for that, but I managed to, obtain scans of it, spend some time cleaning them up.
Hmm.
And so it was only my time was the main cost. There's no big financial investment there.
Hmm.
So that I can try a dozen things, and if three of them work, great. That
Hmm.
works out well for me.
What have you learned, if anything, or you have any thoughts about how a lot of this material, especially the comic strips, are kept relevant, especially for younger readers who have never even known a newspaper, have never even known a lot of these formats. Have you do you have any thoughts about how we keep a lot of this passion alive for those of us who have no nostalgic ties to any of these formats?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it isn't quite where I'm hitting with stuff. I'm not. Well, I do get some stuff into the hands of the younger folks. A lot
Hmm.
of my stuff, the reason I'm reprinting it isn't because it could pass as today's work. The reason
Hmm.
I'm reprinting it is because it shows a time. This was
Hmm.
what we were thinking like in the space race. This is what the space program was like. This is a
Hmm.
book of cartoons about the Great Depression that came out during the Depression. So
Hmm.
they're windows onto their times, and so I really like that. But I think there's always going to be new, fresh material out there for the youth. There's always going to be people who like the form and but also are young enough that they're addressing
Hmm.
whatever happens to be interesting for to the youth at the time.
Hmm.
So I think it's always going to be reinventing itself, and we're never going to know where it's going to reinvent itself.
Hmm.
but I think cartooning is has got its own natural legs.
If cost, marketability, um, were no object at all, um, is there a dream project you'd like to do? Is there something you really are dying to reprint, that you haven't gotten to, or for some reason is out of your reach?
Um, I can't say that there is one specific one. There's always little things I'm chasing after, but I mean, at the moment, I'm trying to get the right to reprint something that I printed before. I just lost the rights to. Some Charles Schulz material because
Hmm.
there was Charles Schulz material that was lying around that wasn't hadn't been available in books for a long time, if ever, and so I put a book like that, a book of that material, something called Schulz's Youth.
Hmm.
But after a few years, I lost the rights, and now I can't get in touch again with the people who hold them to get a new edition. But because I'm publishing largely things I discovered, I think it's clear that other people are doing a really good job. I mean, the reprint situation now is amazing, and
Hmm.
people are doing a really good job of getting the big things that should be in print,
Hmm.
and I'm just living off on the edges.
So tease us a little bit. What are you working on now? What's coming?
What is coming? I usually don't tend to announce that because I don't need early orders. Once the book is available, I like to announce it, but I might as well. I don't see any reason not to mention things at the moment, especially since things will be coming out within the next month.
Hmm.
I've got a book of a strip called Little Folks.
Oh,
Uh,
isn't that the original Peanuts,
no,
strip?
that's Lil Folks.
Little
See,
folks. Okay.
that's
All
where the
right.
tail lies. When Schultz had a series called Lil Folks
Right.
that he had in the local papers, and he wanted to take it national. He wanted to use that name or a variant of that name. He wanted to call it Lil Folk
Okay.
when it became the daily strip we now know as Peanuts. But this other strip from the 1930s had
Yep.
existed. The guy was still claiming some rights to it, and there was reasons for it. A guy named Tack
Hmm.
Knight, and it
Hmm.
was also a strip about kids. In the daily strip, you didn't see adults. It was
Hmm.
standardly four panels of
Hmm.
all the same size. So in some ways, it was a lot like Peanuts, and there would actually have been a conflict there.
Hmm.
But I only knew that strip because of the stories of how it related to Peanuts. So
Yep.
I became curious what it was. I got enough, it's 1930, the stuff from the 1930s in the public domain now. So I got the cleanest versions I could get, and I've got a book coming out of all the dailies from
Hmm.
1930.
Ah.
Um, and also related to Schultz, because sometimes that's where my mind is. I just let me point out I am a Charles Schulz specialist. Have had a
Right.
blog about Peanuts books for a quarter century now. I have written 6 books about Peanuts for various publishers. I have over 1,000 Peanuts books in my personal collection. I'm that insane guy.
Hmm.
I'm about to reprint a book called Yesterdays, which was by a cartoonist named Frank Wing, who was Schultz's teacher.
Hmm.
And this is stuff
Wow.
again from 1930. The book is from 1930. The panels are from the previous year. But it's also they're about the 1880s. So this is a look back at the way you looked back at things in the
Hmm.
1920s.
Hmm.
I've got that, and I've also got a collection of a comic book called Keith Laumer's Retief. And this was a series I did recently reprinted a series called Dalgota,
Hmm.
which was by Jan Chernad and Dennis Fujitake. And it's a great science fiction series, and it had never been in book form. And I got a big 300 and something page omnibus collecting all of it, the original series, the mini series, a couple of
Hmm.
short stories that appeared elsewhere, some spare art we found. A nice big book, and that's been one of my biggest sellers this year.
Hmm.
So the same creative team did another series which looks beautiful and there was a collection of this once, but it came out in like 1990, so it hasn't been available for a long time. So I'm making that available again.
Wow. We look forward to it. How many do you think you're going to have next year?
Um, I'll probably do 12, 15 books next year.
Wow. That's
It's
it's really a testament to what print on demand allows.
Yeah, and I'm saying that, and it could go either way. I could suddenly get a bunch of things to reprint. I could have other things in my life because I sometimes write for other publishers, things like that. So
Hmm.
it all varies, but there's good stuff lying around.
Yeah,
Um,
there
and-
is.
yeah, I mean, I find things something like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. There's a
Yeah.
comic strip version of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and nobody ever talks about it. No, it hasn't been mentioned. And this is a very famous
Hmm.
novel and turned into famous
Right.
movies, famous
Right.
plays, etc.
Right.
And
Right.
so, a year and change ago, I put that out, because
Mhm.
it's just lying around. Why shouldn't it be
I
seen?
reviewed it. There was some interesting artwork in that. I
Yeah,
was, yeah, and some good. And Anita Luce had a little bit of a hand in the writing, or at least it was actually being drawn from. They actually used a lot of the book in
they use
at
a
least
lot of
the
the
early
book,
strip.
and the strip was credited to Anita Luce. I'm not 100% sure how close she was in it, whether she was actually writing the ones that weren't directly from the book, or whether she was just overseeing and permission, because
Yeah.
often with comic strips, the name on the credit is somebody who had something to do with his inception but isn't
Right.
actively in it. But also at the same time, Ring Lardner Jr. was writing his own comic strip. So
Right.
wouldn't be surprising if Anita was doing it.
Right. Nat Gertler, this has been a treat, and I can't. I'll put links to the site and to some of the books that we mentioned, and I'll see, you'll see in the video we'll be popping up some covers so you can get a sense of some of these books we've been talking about. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks very much.